In this video, I'll be showing you the rich ratio and why you should retire before 61, even if you haven't saved enough, because you don't always need more money. You need to cross the income to need threshold before the system starts to shut you out. In over 15 years of working with clients who felt like they weren't always ready, I've discovered that successful retirees don't just ask, do I have enough to retire? They think in terms of how many years of their real lifestyle their income can support, and they know the window to lock that in starts closing after 60. If you're new here, my name's Justin. I own a financial planning firm in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where we help retirees all across the country make smart financial decisions. That's why I'm making today's video. I want to show you why the last best chance to maximize income control and minimize forced changes is before 61, so you can stop waiting to hit some magical savings target and start using the system why it still mostly works in your favor. So let's dive right into it. And now let's start with what I mean by rich ratio and even enough. So before we go any further, I want to be clear about what I mean when I say haven't saved exactly enough. I'm not talking about someone just trying to retire on the bare minimum and just hoping that it works out. I'm more talking about something much more common in scenarios that I see every week. So people who've saved consistently, people who on paper look like they should be fine, but still don't feel like the numbers are giving them permission to stop working. They just keep questioning it endlessly. I find this is especially true in around that $2-ish to $5 million range, where everything looks solid on the spreadsheets, but emotionally nothing feels really locked in. And that's because enough is usually defined the wrong way. I mean, we're taught to think in terms of just accumulation, total net worth, portfolio size, big round numbers that feel impressive and they feel like a milestone. But I find those who actually retire confidently, they don't really think that way, nor do I on the professional side. So we want to think of it in terms of coverage and making the most of the options available. What I mean is most people come into retirement asking just a purely financial question. Do I have enough to retire? But after doing this almost 2 decades now, I've realized that's almost never really what they're really asking. What they're really asking is, am I allowed to stop working? What if I regret this? And then what if I'm wrong and I can't undo it? So that's what's at the heart of all of it. The rich ratio isn't just about net worth. I'd say the rich ratio is how much of your real lifestyle is supported by reliable income, current savings, and structural flexibility without forcing you to trade time, health, or control to maintain it. So when that coverage exists, something interesting happens psychologically. Some of that fear starts to shift. You stop worrying about running out of money and start focusing about running out of time, which is what really matters. And I'll touch on that a lot more here in a minute. And here's the part most people don't expect. That ratio can actually get worse the longer you wait, even while your portfolio grows, because after age 62, the system starts imposing rules, tax changes, healthcare pricing, income thresholds, required distributions, all those things that quietly reduce how much control you have over your own money and how complex retirement feels, which holds a lot of people back. So the goal isn't to just accumulate forever. It's to lock in control in the most optimal time period. And let me show you why this window starts closing after around 60. And the first window I'll talk about is the healthcare window and the permission that it can give people to retire. So one of the biggest emotional blockers I see is healthcare. It's not investments, not market crashes, it is healthcare. I can't tell you how many people say, Justin, I can't retire before 65. Healthcare is just going to cost way too much. So before Medicare, that fear keeps people working years longer than they need to. But what most people don't realize is that before 65, the system actually gives you a temporary bridge. So those Affordable Care Act subsidies, when structured properly, can reduce healthcare costs by tens of thousands of dollars per year. In some cases, can actually cost you less than what Medicare would be at age 65. And that's not a loophole, that's by design. And so just to qualify and take advantage of it, you just need income flexibility and a strategic withdrawal strategy to lower that taxable income. And yes, in 2026, some of the subsidies have been reduced because the enhanced tax credit expired, but they are still pretty significant. And once people understand this, something starts to click a little bit. Healthcare stops being the thing that forces them to keep working. It's something that they can manage and strategically plan around. And for many, this is the moment retirement stops feeling reckless and it starts feeling possible. About 2 years ago, I worked with a couple who had just turned 60. They had right about 1.5, I think 1.8 million saved. Very responsible, did everything right by the book. On paper, most calculators told them to work longer, to wait until 65, but emotionally, they were just exhausted. They kept saying the same thing. We know that we're close, we just don't know if it's safe. So healthcare was the anchor. They were terrified that retiring would blow everything up. Healthcare would be insanely expensive. Once we mapped out that Affordable Care Act window, showed them how they didn't have to pay 30 grand a year for health insurance, they felt relieved. So they ended up retiring right at about 61, not because they had the perfect savings number, because that number never will feel perfect, right? But because a big part of the pressure and fear of the unknown had disappeared, things felt a lot more clear. And when we talk now, they never really want to talk about markets. They talk about time, trips they took, why they're still healthy, days that don't feel rushed. And that's the stuff I love to hear about. That's why I enjoy this job. And that's the difference between enough on paper and enough in real life. And if that story resonates with you, it usually means you're not missing money, you're just missing clarity. If you want some help building your retirement as a whole, click the link below in the description. It will take you to a video where I show you how to optimize retirement, how I approach it, so you can apply some of this to your own situation. There'll be a link there to book a call with me. If I can help, just let me know. Glad to do it. And so that healthcare window is often the emotional permission slip many people need. But what really changes after 62 is your ability to stay in control. So here's what changes after 62 and why waiting feels safer than it really is. And nothing dramatic happens all at once, but a lot of small things start stacking up. Social Security becomes available, which can be its own psychological trap in a way. Income thresholds start to matter more, especially at age 63, because future healthcare costs become tied to some past decisions because of IRMA penalties. Flexibility shrinks a little bit. This is when people will say, I'll just work a few more years to be safe. And I see this all the time. Emotionally, it makes sense, but in reality, working longer just trades one kind of risk for another. You may have more money, but fewer choices, a bigger balance, but more forced decisions later. And this is where I push back on the idea that waiting is always conservative. People, I think, underestimate how valuable optionality is. And once that flexibility is gone, it's gone. And now you might be watching this and think, Justin, I get what you're trying to say, but of course you're better off with saving more. I can tell you though from experience that you're not. You are up to a certain point, yes, but the hardest part for the vast majority of people I speak to is knowing when that point is. That's where people get stuck. And I think this is where timing starts to matter a lot more than just blind savings totals. And most people don't realize it until the window is already closing. And so let's talk about the flexibility window and the tax advantages that most people miss. So before 61, something subtle but powerful is true. You're in a window where very little income is actually forced on you. So there's no required distributions yet. There's no mandatory benefits. There's no automatic sequencing decisions happening yet. And that flexibility isn't just emotional. It has real tax implications, even if you aren't trying to optimize everything. And I'd say for many households who have done a great job saving, this period becomes the first time in decades where their tax brackets aren't already spoken for and filled up by wages, and that creates a lot of options. Sometimes that means doing intentional strategic Roth conversions, if that's a strategy that makes sense for you, to move money out of buckets that will later be forced to come out at higher tax rates. Other times it means realizing income when you choose instead of when the system decides for you later on with RMDs. This also means being able to plan out and map out your spending over the first few years of retirement so it's all efficient. And this is exciting stuff. It's great to be able to do that and be able to plan around that. For some people, it also means not really having to do anything at all, but knowing that they could act if conditions change. And I'd say that's where a lot of the real value is. This window isn't about executing a perfect tax plan. It's never going to be perfect, right? It's more about taking advantage of opportunity and reducing future pressure. And once you move past this phase, then more income sources turn on automatically. You have Social Security, Medicare costs, required distributions, all of those will start to narrow your room to maneuver a bit. And I'd say these mistakes here don't necessarily become catastrophic. It's not doom and gloom here. They just become harder to fix. So retiring earlier doesn't mean you suddenly have to know everything about taxes. You certainly don't. It just means you still have a lot of time and space to make calm, deliberate decisions instead of reactive ones. And once you understand how much flexibility this window gives you, then the cost of waiting becomes impossible to ignore. And here's what working longer really costs. And this is the part I really like to talk about. And I wish more people talked a lot more about this, honestly. So when you work longer to save more, you're not just trading time for money, you're often trading your healthiest years for a future that may not cooperate. I could tell quite a few stories of those who finally retired and then their health started to go downhill. You might know many people in that situation as well. In your early 60s, time is still flexible, your energy is usually still there, your body still says yes more often than maybe. And I know that might not mean a lot coming from me. You're probably like, Justin, you're a young guy. I just turned 44. Hopefully I have a lot more time left. But I've watched this scenario play out over and over again. People delay retirement for 5, 6, 7 years. They finally hit a number that feels safe and then slowly realize something uncomfortable. They don't live the life that they were saving for. Those trips get shorter. The plans get postponed or canceled. Money becomes something that they protect instead of use. I just had this conversation with a client this past week about intentionally spending on things to add value to their life. So time doesn't compound. Once it's gone, it's gone. And that's why this rich ratio matters. Because if your income and savings can already support your life, even imperfectly, then the real question stops being, how much more can I save? And becomes, what am I giving up to do so? And finally, to sum everything up, why before around 61 is the last best window, there's nothing magical about 60, 61. It's just the last point before the system starts to close off a lot of opportunities around you. So before 61, you still have income control. You have a lot of that withdrawal and tax flexibility. You also have the ability to choose instead of just have to react. And then after that, a lot more decisions just get made for you. Social Security pressures the timing. Healthcare costs become stickier. Income choices start echoing into future years, whether you intend them to or not. And that's why so many people who haven't saved, quote, enough, meaning they don't feel ready, they still choose to retire before or in their early 60s because they understand something a little bit deeper, that money is largely replaceable, time is not. So the rich ratio isn't about having more money. It's about locking in control, flexibility, and enjoying your life while those things are still abundant. That's what good retirement planning is all about. And so now that you've seen the rich ratio, why you should ideally try to retire before 61, even if you haven't hit, quote, enough, how healthcare subsidies worth tens of thousands per year will disappear at Medicare, Social Security sequencing, RMD compression, all those things, how all those things will constrict your options after age 62. You can stop asking, do I have enough on paper, and start asking, do I have the right window to lock in what I have with the most options? If you want help building your retirement, click the link below. It'll take you to a video where I go over my retirement process, what I put into it, and there'll be a link there to book a call with me. If I can help, just let me know. Happy to do it. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next one.